In today's episode of Esports Analysis, Seth, Scumpy, Abner, and the Chicago Huntsmen battle Pristini and the Florida Mutineers in hardpoint on Hackney Yard. For those that might be new to my channel and are checking in for the first time, the whole point of this series is I'm going to break down some of the strategy involved in these competitive matches, and I'm going to really highlight the decision making that leads towards one of these teams defeating the other. Not necessarily to give it away, but just kind of as a preface to what you're going to see in the rest of this video. I strategically picked this map for this episode as in the end of this map, the Huntsmen ended up making a critical decision that really cost them the game. Last but not least, as an avid viewer of competitive Call of Duty, I think it's really important that we are able to get those listen-ins. Like if you're watching an MLG tournament or something like that, whenever they go to those Astro listen-ins, I feel like it's really important to key in on what people are saying so you understand what's happening in the map. One of the great things about these team scrims being streamed is that we're able to hear what people are talking about, what they're saying, kind of what their strategy is. So as we go ahead and actually start breaking down some of the film here, these initial hills are kind of like scrap time, right? Usually the first hill is right in the middle, and if you can build up a lead or if you can get 20 or 30 points, kind of like what the Huntsmen have here, then that's a pretty good start. But really what you want to do is you want to start rearranging spawns so that you have spawns when it comes to the next side. To really gain an in-depth idea of what's going on here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause this. I'm going to bring up this picture of the spawns. So this is the hardpoint rotation on the map Hackney Yard. And if we go ahead and we start talking about spawns, the Huntsmen ended up getting the Allegiance spawn. So they spawned by the number 5 that's on your screen. The Mutineers ended up getting the Coalition spawn, so they spawned by the number 2, kind of where that yellow arrow is. So, like I was saying just a few seconds ago, that hill, that very first hill is kind of like scrap time. If you can get 10, 15, 20, 25 points at the beginning there, that's great. But what you really want to do is you want to start setting up spawns for that second hard point. I went ahead and I paused this gameplay here because what Scump ends up doing is he's trying to set up spawns for number 2. He actually ends up going right where that yellow arrow is at the top right hand of your screen, but that's not one of the primary spawns in hardpoint on this map. If you're at the bottom, so if you're underneath 2 in that bottom right corner, that's where the primary spawn is. So even though he ended up flanking around and getting pretty close to number 2, you'll see that a few of his teammates end up dying, but they're still spawning out just because he's not in that primary spawn. So what you want to do is, if you're pushing through here, you want to try to get that bottom right location instead of that top right location. That would end up giving your team spawns, and now you're set up for the second hard point.
They're spawning. They should be spawning right side hill.
I'll kill that guy. Mid up, yep. Back right. Back right. Still spawn dead.
Hill dead. Two back right. One shot back right, Mom. Oh, I'm stunned, bro. I'm dead.
Got me back right.
They're still spawning there, dude.
Yeah.
This game sucks, dude.
No squad spawn for us. I have break there, dude.
Oh my god.
Now, as you can tell there with that listen-in, Scump was a little bit concerned just because of the fact he did end up pushing that spawn, and in most Call of Duties, that's usually enough. If you're in the hill, you get a couple kills, normally that's enough to spawn the other team out. In this game in particular, the spawn logic seems to be really tough, so there were still a couple people in that back right corner. If he were to get a couple more kills, or maybe his teammate gets 1 or 2, then that probably would have been enough. But even so, by the time he was in there, it was almost a little bit too late. If they would have spawned out, they would have been closer to the next hill, which kind of would have been a disaster. Anyways, the next hill, number 3, is right in the middle. So right underneath that tent, that tarp, that awning, that's kind of right in the middle of the map. In this listen-in, if you were to hear them talking, they're talking about holding down bottom first just being the hard point. But really what they're trying to do is they're just not allowing them to flank through to the other side. Mainly being is that the third hard point is right here in the middle. The fourth hard point is what's called in green. I'll bring up a map here in a second to show you. But the fifth hard point, so the third and the fourth hard point are kind of right in the middle of the map. It doesn't really necessarily matter what side you're on. But the fifth hard point is on their original spawn. It's right beside where Scump spawned right now. So if they go ahead and they give up spawns right now, it's not a huge deal for the third and the fourth hard point, but you're going to end up getting crushed in that fifth hard point. You could give up all of that time, 50, 55, 60 seconds the entire time if you end up giving up these spawns. So they're really focused right now on not giving up that back spawn, and deservedly so, because if they give up that back spawn, they might get 20 or 30 here in hardpoint 3 and 4, but you can easily max out the entire time in that 5th hardpoint, and that's what they're going for right now. Let's go ahead, let's get back into a listen in, and then as this hill goes and rotates from the 4th to the 5th, I'm just going to let you watch this spawn logic, because they spawn kind of in 1st just for a little bit, and then they end up securing those kills back in 5th, and then they end up locking those kills down. So let's go ahead. Scump's going to get a few kills in this 4th hill here. He's going to end up getting them the lead, and then we'll go ahead and we'll watch this spawn logic play out as they're back in the 5th hill.
Top green challenge. He's on the wall. He's under you, right there. Oh yeah, you got it. One more half wall. Half wall. I'm trying to
I got him at old.
Got a first. Do we have first?
Yeah, I have first right now.
I'm going to top yellow right now. Let's see if I can middle right now. They're bottom L, I think. They're bottom L weak.
Holding top L
weak.
Holding bottom L.
I'm mid old dead.
Actually, where do you spawn, Pierce?
I have an initial. One top yellow. Top yellow dead. Another
one dead, L.
I have a trophy right.
There's 20 deep.
Green, one's green.
I'm backing up. Middle map, mid map.
There's 2 green, 3 green.
I made it over.
Another one green.
One's close. He's front hill already hitting hill.
All right, welcome back here. I just want to make a real quick note. If you look at the mini map in the top left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see right now that Arcides is in hill and Formal's the only one that's back, kind of by that yellow building, that back right yellow building that's back there. So what ends up happening is that's a crucial kill there, because Formal's the only one that's left that's holding down these spawns. If he dies, then it's very likely that the Mutineers would end up taking over that spawn and thus taking over this hardpoint. So when this gets back to the gameplay, you'll see that Formal gets this kill, and then Scump and everybody else spawns right there on Formal. So the spawn logic, again, it's really tough in this game. It's really strong in this game, but this is a really clutch kill by Formal, because again, if he doesn't get this, then there's a pretty good chance that the Mutineers are going to take over this spawn. They're going to flip spawns, and there's 43 seconds left in this hardpoint. So if they lock this down, they're going to easily take the lead.
One's first somewhere. Yeah, he's top first. Top first.
I need it right.
I spawned first, bro. Yeah, hold on.
You're a weirdo. You're actually a freak.
Mid dead.
Bottom green, Scott.
We're going new. All of you go
on right, yeah.
One's he's already top AC Pristini.
He got me. He's on the wall. There's 2 left.
Yo, I spawned. We flipped.
Yeah, they're
play, guys.
I got one.
Just a quick note here, that is absolutely a broken spawn. So there's no way. The Huntsman had absolutely nobody on that side of the map. Seth should have never spawned there. He shouldn't even be close there. He should still be spawning at the last hardpoint. So the fact that he spawned there is absolutely broken. You'll hear a lot of the pros complain about stuff like that. They're just always kind of saying how broken the game is. That's a prime example of a broken spawn. Now, again, as we get back into this here, you'll see that Huntsmen have a pretty good lead. It's 160-110 right now as we're currently recording this. But again, they're in kind of that scrap hill, but they're holding down that back right spawn. So you can see that Huntsmen right now are trying to push it out. If you look at the minimap, there are 2 arrows on that back left side, and they both ended up dying. So Formal and Envoy both ended up dying there, and they're spawning back at that 5th hardpoint. So they're still kind of stuck over here, and as the score gets closer, so we went from having a 60-point lead, now we're down to about a 20-25 point lead, and you don't have spawns. So this has bad, terrible news written all over it. And then the other thing is, they keep flooding into this previous hill. And I think what they're trying to do is just kind of get this scrap time. They know that they don't have spawns for the next one anyways. So, I don't know, this, whether it's good or bad to go ahead and take these 10 points, I guess it's kind of a toss-up. But what they should have been trying to do is make a concerted effort to push out that spawn rather than continuing to run into bottom first, underneath that awning there. And here we go, into the next hard point. They still don't have spawns.
They're mid crates, 2 of their top mid crates. He team killed.
I got him.
Right on me.
They're spawning back right, guys. They're spawning back right.
Yeah,
back left, 2 in hill.
Was that more hill? Okay.
Nice, Matt. There's 20 back left, back right.
They're mid wall weak. Mid wall
dead.
Other one back right.
I just did the same thing, Alec. I thought there was a door there, bro.
So that there was kind of funny. Just to kind of barge in real quick, Scump and Alec both tried to go into a door that didn't exist, and that just kind of tells you know how new this game is. So while I'm being a little bit critical of spawn knowledge and stuff like that, the fact that they're still trying to run in doors that don't exist tells everybody that this is still pretty new in the whole grand scheme of things. So let's just not be overly critical of what we're seeing here on screen.
They can be green, guys. They can be green.
Yeah, we're holding first.
Middle.
Top tail dead.
Middle.
Nice.
Middle
Go
weak,
top
middle weak
AC.
to an edge,
What
middle
are
weak to an edge.
you doing, Sky? Back wall.
I'm watching
All the way in the back.
green push.
I
Maybe
spawned
on
on
hill.
hill.
I'm back.
I'm trying to go
One
top
shot.
three. I'm trying to go top three.
One bottom mid, top.
Top again. I can't see that. I got him.
Bottom mid crate.
I
Make
just
sure you have
fell.
my L. I'm hugging L side.
I don't have green side.
Now would probably be a pretty good time to just point out that they're really trying super hard to hold down first over there. And reason being is that behind first, so back in that back yellow building where Formal got that clutch kill earlier, that's the strongest spawn logic. Where Scump right there, he just spawned there. So they're really trying to hold down first, just because if they end up pushing through first to get to that back yellow building, they're going to end up taking over those spawns. And again, for 3 and 4, it doesn't really matter. But for 5, that's where you get a huge amount of points, so they're trying really hard just to hold it down here. Now, as you'll see, Seth was the only person on that side of the map, so his death ends up being what is their downfall in this game. Right now, take a look at the minimap. If you look up there, there's nobody else that's back by number 5. Seth is kind of the furthest one towards number 5, and right now they're trying to get into the 4th hardpoint. So nobody is pushing out that back spawn, and right now there's about 45 seconds left, and you're going to see that they get so close to winning off of this hardpoint. So I think what they end up doing is they end up overcommitting to number 4, and they don't end up making a concerted effort to get back into the spawns for 5. They have 3 players in this hard point right now. What they need to be doing is sending 4 or 5 people through mid or through first, so that they can try and push out that spawn, because essentially this doesn't matter, right? This time doesn't matter. Unless they have every single second, you'll see that there are 15 seconds left for this hardpoint. Unless they got almost every one of them, they're not going to win. So they end up overcommitting to this 4th hardpoint, and if they don't get every point, which they end up not doing right now, it's at 249. You'll see that it's contested right now, so they're going to the last one, and what ends up happening is they overcommitted here, and now they're not able to take advantage of that super strong spawn logic that is backed by number 5 right over by that yellow building we've talked about a few different times during this gameplay. Last thing I want to point out as this game comes down to the wire here is that essentially they know that they need 1 second. So if somebody can just get in, get a clutch kill, and get that final second, then they're probably going to win. And what ends up happening is they end up staggering their deaths. This is a gameplay mechanic that's really popular in games like Overwatch, where you need just a little bit more, so you end up staggering. One person runs in, tries to be the hero, and they die. Another person runs in, tries to be a hero, and then they die. That's kind of what's happening now. Nothing that's going on right now in this process is coordinated. You have just one person flooding in after another, but they're not doing it together. And you'll see that right now, 246, 247, this game ends up being over, and they just kind of lost their minds a little bit there towards the end. With all of that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Esports Analysis. If you're new around here and you learned something and you want to tune in for more, I'll be covering all of the CDL. I'll be covering all the major tournaments. If you want to subscribe for analysis on all of those matches, please go ahead and do so. Thank you guys again. I will catch you in the next one. See ya.